Alright, I was going to rank Minnesota's coasters, but I couldn't think of any way to differentiate that with another video idea I had. So you're stuck with Iowa for now. Also, I know there are 16 roller coasters in this state, and I've only been on 12 of them, so I will be eluding those I haven't ridden from this list. I believe they're just a bunch of kiddie coasters, so it really doesn't matter. Like my last video, I will add the overall ranking in the top right corner. With that out of the way, let's get into the video. Easily taking last place in this video is Napoko at Lost Island. This coaster doesn't just take last place on this list, it takes last place on my overall list. This is my actual least favorite roller coaster I've ever ridden. This ride has the single most painful moment on any coaster I've experienced. The transition into the first inversion made me scream so loud in pain, I'm sure the ride ops could hear me. And there were 3 more instances just like that during the rest of the ride. It also doesn't help that the restraints actually came down enough to cause pain in my legs. When I was on the brake run, I was begging to get off. Even when I got off, I could still feel my legs throbbing. This whole ride was a terrible experience that I would not recommend. Taking 11th place is Outlaw at Lost Island. A kiddie coaster ranked higher than an SLC? Who would have thought? This is just a standard wacky worm. There's no real force on this ride, but it's not trying to be forceful, and at least it's not painful. Starting my top 10 is Tornado at Adventureland. This ride is just big and boring. With a bunch of airtime hills, you'd expect to get at least some semblance of airtime, but there surely wasn't any that I could find. The valleys weren't that much better as they got pretty rough. At least there were decent positives in the valleys, so this ride had some kind of fun factor. Continuing into the single digits is Flying Viking at Adventureland. This is a very well executed family coaster. I love the way it ties in with the water ride at the same plot of land. The theming on this ride is also kinda cool. I like the posters on the right explaining the Viking history as you enter the station. Again, there's not much force on this ride, but the helixes were surprisingly intense for a family coaster. Other than that, don't expect any other kinds of forces. This ride is just a perfect step up from kiddie coasters. Taking the 8th spot on this list is the Underground at Adventureland. This ride is even better at being a family coaster. The laterals were something I was not expecting for a coaster of this caliber. This ride is also pretty long, and having all of this theming around you makes you really get immersed into the world of the characters on this ride. I was actually surprised to see all these effects working. It really made me appreciate this ride. Definitely check this one out if you go to Adventureland. In 7th place is Outlaw at Adventureland. With this ride, you'll get decent amounts of all forces. However, the first drop gives bonkers laterals in the back row. The pops into the turns give decent floater in the front, and the dips out give decent floater in the back. The laterals on the turns are pretty good, but not crazy. This makes it resemble a GCI in some way, but it takes the jank to another level. It doesn't make the ride worse, it's just an observation. This ride doesn't try to be the craziest, but it's a lot of fun to ride. Taking 6th place is Mad Mouse at Arnold's Park. This ride has the wildest laterals on any coaster I've ridden, even over Pegasus. With those open trains, I couldn't decide to hold on my phone or the side of the train. They have you ride with your belongings on this ride. If you aren't bracing yourself, you will hit the side of the train pretty hard. Aside from the laterals, there's almost nothing else to note. The big swooping turns are quite janky, and the dip after the final turn is extremely violent. And then the rest of the ride is just straight track, but those laterals do make up for it. Entering the top 5, I have Dragon Slayer at Adventureland. There shouldn't be much to say for this S&S free spin, but my rides on it were something else. On my first ride, which was my first ride on any S&S free spin, I flipped 6 times, and then on my second, I only flipped once. Both rides were on the wild side. My placement of this ride is just based on the middle ground. This ride scared the shit out of me when I rode it, and I will never forget that experience. In 4th place is Phoenix at Adventureland. This ride was a blast to ride with my friends on. Since there were 3 of us, we had a decent offset with the balance in our train. We didn't spin that much, but I still enjoyed this ride. The positives in the valleys were pretty intense, and the laterals going through that overbank and final switchback were pretty fun. The spinning may have been underwhelming, but I enjoyed this ride for the other forces it had. Taking the bronze medal is the Legend at Arnold's Park. I can't overstate how much the forces on this ride slap. The airtime pops going into the turns were pretty strong. The airtime hills all gave at least decent floater airtime. The positives and laterals are also nothing to scoff at. The laterals and the turns were very surprising, and the valleys were pretty good. Again, the drop may be a buzzkill, but the rest of the ride makes sure it's irrelevant. This ride has amazing forces. If it was longer, it would have landed much higher for me. Taking the second spot for this video is Mugani at Lost Island. This ride may not look the most crazy, but it's a real powerhouse. The launch was very punchy for a relatively slow top speed. The airtime is what I point to the most. The airtime coming down the top hat in the back row is just insane. And then there's a speed hill that gives more extremely strong airtime. The switchback hill after the loop gives genuinely fantastic airtime and whip, and is my favorite moment on the ride. With the airtime hill after that, you won't really get much there or the following helix, which really makes those elements the done moments for the forces. Thankfully, you finish with a fantastic hangtime filled roll to complement the hangtime from the loop greatly. I love how this ride defies the need for height and extreme speed to be great. Easily taking first place for this video is Monster at Adventureland. This ride's hangtime is otherworldly. With just a lap bar, you get to experience the hangtime at its greatest. All those inversions just take the standard elements to a whole new level of weird. The dive loop has great laterals as it only twists when you're about to level out. I love how the loop is flattened at the top to give the greatest hangtime a loop could give. Don't fact check me on that. Even though I like those elements more, I still appreciate the trims before the last two elements, so you can experience even more hang time. The designers definitely knew what they were doing with this ride. This is a ride that proves you don't need fast pacing to make a fantastic ride, and I love it for that. That will be all for this video. I really hope you enjoyed. Next up, I plan on making videos for ranking the coasters of Cedar Point and Six Flags Great America. I had been really looking forward to going to those parks, so it's fitting I make videos on them. With that said, it's time for me to go. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.